Welcome to Sci-Fi Space. Before we starting today's wonderful story, take a second to check if you've subscribed. Because it's completely free and it is a huge motivation for us to create more great stories. Lyra's world was collapsing, and no one cared. The Serene girl, barely 10 years old, lay trapped under a slab of durasteel in the heart of Calher's mining colony. Her translucent skin glimmered faintly, streaked with dirt and violet blood that oozed from her crushed legs. Above her, the sky roared with the clash of the Serene Union and Vaxar Dominion, two alien factions tearing each other apart in a war that had already claimed millions. Lyra's small hands clawed at the rubble, her glowing amber eyes wide with terror as she screamed for help. Her voice, thin and desperate, barely cut through the thunder of artillery and the shrieks of plasma bolts ripping through the air. She'd been scavenging for scraps near the colony's edge when the latest bombardment hit. A Vaxar drone misfired, leveling the storage depot she hid in, pinning her beneath the wreckage. Now, her breaths came in shallow gasps, each one weaker than the last. Blood pooled under her, soaking the cracked ground, and pain seared through her body like fire. She didn't understand the war, only that it had taken her father months ago and left her mother scrambling to survive. Lyra was alone, insignificant, a speck in a conflict that devoured everything. Serene soldiers sprinted past, their armor clanking as they fled a collapsing tunnel. One paused, his sharp eyes flicking to Lyra. She reached out, trembling, a plea choking in her throat. He shook his head, muttering something about no time, and ran on. Minutes later, a Vaxar enforcer loomed over her, a hulking figure with reptilian scales and a triple-jawed maw. His clawed hand twitched toward his plasma rifle, and Lyra froze, her heart pounding. She thought he'd end her suffering. Instead, he sneered, spat a curse in his guttural tongue, and stomped away, his heavy boots kicking dust into her face. To him, she wasn't worth the ammo. Lyra's vision blurred as the edges darkened. She whispered a prayer to the Serene's twin moons, begging for someone, anyone, to save her. But who would? The Serene Union cared only for victory, sacrificing their own to hold the line. The Vaxar Dominion saw her kind as vermin, exterminating without mercy. Betrayal was everywhere. Serene commanders abandoned their posts, and Vaxar drones turned on their own squads in the chaos. Lyra was nothing to them, a dying child in a war that didn't pause for tears. Her cries grew fainter, swallowed by the sounds of destruction. A plasma storm crackled overhead, its bolts slamming into the ground nearby, shaking the rubble that pinned her. She flinched, a sob escaping her lips, but no one stopped. A group of Serene miners stumbled past, their faces hollow with exhaustion. One glanced at her, hesitated, then hurried on as a Vaxar patrol fired warning shots. Lyra's fingers slipped from the durasteel, too weak to hold on. She was fading, her body shutting down, her hope crumbling with the colony around her. Then, through the haze, a shadow moved, different from the others. Not Serene, not Vaxar, but human. Sergeant Nathan Cole, a medic with the Terran Coalition, crouched behind a Rector cart, his gray eyes scanning the battlefield. He'd been stationed here to patch up his own, ordered to stay neutral in this alien mess. But Lyra's wail hit him like a punch to the gut. He saw her, trapped and bleeding, her glowing eyes dimming with every second. His jaw tightened. Around him, the war raged on, soldiers ignoring the girl, drones hunting targets, explosions rocking the ground. Nathan's hand gripped his medkit, his mind racing. He wasn't supposed to get involved. Orders were clear, humans first, aliens last. But as Lyra's head lolled to the side, her breath a faint rattle, something in him snapped. He couldn't just watch her die. Sergeant Nathan Cole didn't hesitate long. Lyra's faint cry still echoed in his ears, pulling at something deep in his chest. He'd seen plenty of death, too much, maybe, in his 15 years with the Terran Coalition. The human medic was a grizzled 40-something, hair graying at the temples, scars crisscrossing his knuckles from battles he'd rather forget. Stationed on Calher to keep the peace, his job was simple: patch up Coalition troops, stay out of the alien war. But that wail, high-pitched, desperate, and fading, changed everything. He peeked over the wrecked ore cart, spotting Lyra's small form pinned under the durasteel slab. Her violet blood stained the dirt, her amber eyes flickering like a dying light. Nathan's stomach twisted. "Damn it," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. His squad was 50 yards back, hunkered down near a supply drop. Captain Marcus Hale's voice crackled through his comms, sharp and cold. "Cole, you're on recon. Stay put. We don't bleed for their kind." Nathan's fingers tightened on his medkit. Orders were orders, but leaving a kid to die didn't sit right. Private Jonas, a wiry medic in training, chimed in over the link. "She's serene, Sarge. Not our problem. Hale'll have your ass if you move." The rest of the squad grumbled agreement, tired, scared voices wanting to stay alive. Nathan ignored them. He'd taken an oath once, back on Earth, to save lives, not to pick favorites. Lyra wasn't a soldier or a threat, just a girl caught in someone else's mess. He slung his medkit over his shoulder, decision made. "Cole, report." Hale barked again, louder this time. Nathan's jaw clenched. "Got a situation," he said, voice low and rough. "Civilian down." "I'm checking it out." Before Hale could argue, Nathan cut the comms, the static fading to silence. Jonas swore through the link, "You're screwed, man," but Nathan was already moving, boots crunching over shattered rock as he sprinted toward Lyra. The air split with a deafening crack, a plasma storm rolling in fast. Bolts of white-hot energy slammed into the ground, kicking up clouds of dust and shrapnel. One streaked past Nathan's head, close enough to cinch his ear. He cursed, ducking low, heart pounding like a drum. The colony shook, tunnels collapsing in the distance with a roar that drowned out everything else. He didn't stop. Lyra was 20 yards away now, her cries barely audible over the chaos. His squad's threats rang in his head. Jonas had already ratted him out, Nathan could feel it. Hale would court-martial him for this, maybe worse. The Coalition didn't mess around with insubordination, especially not in a war zone where humans were supposed to stay neutral. But Nathan didn't care. He'd seen too many bodies left behind, too many faces he couldn't save. This one, he could save this one. 10 yards out, a Vaxar drone buzzed overhead, its red sensors locking onto him. Nathan dove behind a toppled crate as a plasma bolt scorched the spot he'd just been. "Son of a," he growled, rolling to his knees. The drone circled, hunting, but he didn't have time to fight it. Lyra's head lolled to the side, her small chest barely moving. He bolted again, sliding to her side in a spray of gravel. Up close, she looked worse, legs crushed, blood soaking through her torn clothes, a jagged gash across her side. Nathan dropped to his knees, ripping open his medkit. "Hang on, kid," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I've got you." She whimpered, eyes fluttering, too weak to speak. He grabbed a biofoam canister, spraying it over the worst of her wounds. The foam hissed, sealing the gashes, but her breathing stayed shallow, ragged. Hale's voice broke through the comms again, furious, "Cole, you're done. Get back here now, or I'll have you hauled in chains." Nathan didn't flinch. "Fuck that," he snapped, switching the comms off completely. He wasn't leaving her. Not now. A shadow moved in the corner of his eye, Vaxar troops closing in, their growls cutting through the storm. Nathan scooped Lyra up, her frail body light in his arms, and stood. "You're not dying today," he muttered, turning toward the base. The odds were against him, but he'd be damned if he let her go. Nathan Cole held Lyra tight, her small body trembling against his chest. The Siren girl's violet blood smeared his gloves, her crushed legs dangling limp as he worked fast. He yanked the Durasteel slab pinning her, muscles straining, until it shifted with a groan. She cried out a sharp, pain sound that cut through the rumble of Kalher's war zone. "Easy, kid," Nathan grunted, sliding her free. Up close, her injuries were brutal, bones jutted from her legs, a metal shard stabbed into her side, and her breathing rattled like a broken engine. He sprayed more biofoam, the stuff bubbling as it sealed her wounds, but it wasn't enough. She needed surgery, and fast. A plasma bolt screamed past, slamming into the ground 10 feet away. Nathan ducked, shielding Lyra as dirt rained down. He glanced up, a Vaxar sniper perched on a ridge, his scope glinting red in the haze. "Bastard," Nathan muttered, adrenaline spiking. He scooped Lyra up, her weight pulling at his sliced arm, and bolted for cover. The sniper fired again, the shot grazing his shoulder, scorching his uniform. Pain flared, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. The Terran base was 3 miles east, through the heart of this mess, and Lyra didn't have time to bleed out. The ground shook as a tunnel collapsed behind them, a cloud of dust swallowing the path he'd planned. "Great," he growled, scanning for options. The only way left was through a Vaxar stronghold, a barracks crawling with troops. He adjusted Lyra in his arms, her head lolling against his chest, and sprinted toward it. Every step jolted her, drawing weak whimpers, but stopping wasn't an option. The sniper's shots trailed him, kicking up sparks until Nathan ducked into a narrow alley, his boots pounding the cracked pavement. Halfway through, a figure stepped from the shadows, tall, wiry, with Lyra's amber eyes and translucent skin. A Siren, but his armor was patched, his plasma blade scarred from use. "Human," he spat, voice dripping venom. "What's your game?" Nathan stopped, chest heaving. "She's dying. I'm getting her out." The guy, Kale, he'd later learn, sneered, stepping closer. "You're using her. Another human trick to look noble while you steal our land." Nathan's temper flared. "She's your damn kin, and you're arguing? Help me or move." Kale lunged, blade slashing. Nathan twisted, taking the hit on his leg, a shallow cut, but it stung like hell. Lyra gasped, her eyes fluttering open. "Uncle," she whispered, voice faint. Kale froze, blade hovering, then backed off, cursing. "You'll regret this, human," he snarled, melting back into the smoke. Nathan didn't wait to figure out what that meant. He staggered on, blood trickling down his leg, Lyra's weight dragging harder with every step. The barracks loomed ahead, its gates cracked open like a trap waiting to snap. Nathan slipped inside, sticking to shadows as Vaxar guards patrolled. Their growls echoed, claws scraping metal. He crouched behind a stack of crates, heart hammering, as a drone buzzed overhead. Lyra's breathing hitched, shallow, too fast. "Stay with me," he whispered, checking her pulse. It was weak, fading. He pulled a stim shot from his medkit, jabbing it into her arm. She flinched, a small cry escaping, but her eyes sharpened for a second. Good enough. A patrol stomped closer, their reptilian eyes scanning. Nathan held his breath, pressing Lyra against the crate. One Vaxar sniffed the air, head tilting toward them. Nathan's hand slid to his sidearm, ready to shoot his way out if it came to that. The guard grunted, then moved on, distracted by a distant explosion. Nathan exhaled, wiping sweat from his face. Too close, he muttered, shifting Lyra to stand. His leg throbbed, his shoulder burned, but the base was still miles off, and the clock was ticking. He pushed deeper into the stronghold, dodging patrols, every noise a threat. A collapsing wall forced him left, into an open courtyard. Bad move. A Vaxar squad spotted him, 3 of them, rifles raised. Drop the girl, one roared, voice guttural. Nathan didn't think, just ran. Lyra clutched tight. Plasma fire lit up the yard, bolts searing past as he dove behind a wrecked transport. Shrapnel pinged off the metal, one shard nicking his cheek. He cursed, checking Lyra. She was still breathing, barely. Hang on, kid, he said, voice raw. We're not dying here. Nathan stumbled out of the Vaxar courtyard, Lyra's limp form cradled in his arms. His leg burned where Kale's blade had sliced it, and his shoulder ached from the sniper's graze, but he pushed through the pain. The Siren girl's breathing was a faint rasp now, her amber eyes half open, staring at nothing. He ducked into a ruined storeroom, its walls cracked and sagging, and set her down against a pile of busted crates. Hold on, kid, he muttered, digging into his medkit. The biofoam was holding, but blood still seeped from her side. She needed more than he could give here. Footsteps shuffled behind him. Nathan spun, hand on his sidearm, but it wasn't Vaxar, just a ragged group of Siren refugees. 5 of them, battered and bleeding, their translucent skin pale under the grime. A woman stepped forward, her amber eyes locking on Lyra. My daughter, she rasped, voice thick with desperation. She dropped to her knees beside the girl, hands trembling as she touched her face. Tira, she said, glancing at Nathan. I'm Tira. You're human, why help her? Nathan met her gaze, steady despite the exhaustion clawing at him. Because she's a kid. That's enough. Tira's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. Humans don't care about us. You want something, glory, leverage. Nathan shook his head, voice rough. I want her alive. That's it. Tira hesitated, then nodded, tears streaking her dirt-streaked face. Save her, then. Please. The other refugees watched, silent, their hope pinned on a stranger they didn't trust. Nathan turned back to Lyra, rigging a pressure bandage over her worst wound. Her pulse was thready, time was slipping away. A roar cut through the air, a Terran dropship, its engines kicking up dust as it hovered overhead. Nathan's comms crackled to life. Cole, it's Kane, a familiar voice said. Lieutenant Sarah Kane, a pilot he'd served with for years. Saw your signal. You hurt? Relief hit him hard. Got a kid dying here, he replied. Need a lift to base, now? Sarah's tone sharpened. Hale's gonna bury you for this, but I'm inbound. Hang tight. The ship touched down 50 yards off, ramp dropping. Nathan scooped Lyra up, nodding to Tira. Come on everyone. They piled in, Tira clutching Lyra's hand, the refugees crowding the hold. Sarah glanced back from the cockpit, her short blonde hair plastered with sweat. This is a one-way favor, Cole. I'm not dying for aliens. Nathan nodded, too tired to argue. The dropship lifted off, engines whining as Vaxar drones locked on. Plasma bolts streaked past, rocking the hull. Sarah cursed, banking hard. "They're on us," she shouted. Nathan braced Lyra, her small body jolting with every hit. Halfway to the base, Sarah's voice dropped, cold. "I can't do this." Before Nathan could react, she hit a button. The rear hatch cracked open, wind howling through the hold. "Sarah, what the hell?" he started, but she cut him off. "I'm sorry, Sarge. I've got a kid back home. Can't risk it." The ship tilted, and Nathan grabbed Lyra as the refugees screamed. Sarah ejected him, Lyra, Tyra, all of them, dumping them into a crater 50 feet below. The dropship peeled away, vanishing into the smoke. "You bitch!" Nathan roared, voice lost in the wind. He hit the ground hard, rolling to shield Lyra. Pain exploded in his ribs, but he checked her first. She was alive, barely. Tyra landed nearby, groaning as she crawled over. "My baby," she whispered, clutching Lyra's hand. The other refugees weren't so lucky to lay still, necks snapped. Nathan's gut twisted. "Damn it, Sarah," he muttered, fury boiling. An airstrike siren wailed, Vaxar bombers closing in, their shadows darkening the crater. Tyra grabbed his arm, eyes wild. "The others save them too. They're dying." She pointed to the survivors, one bleeding out from a shrapnel wound. Nathan looked at Lyra, her chest barely moving, then at the refugees. His head pounded. He couldn't carry them all, not with a base still miles off and bombs incoming. "I'll get help," he said, voice tight. "But she comes first." Tyra sobbed, nodding. "Just keep her alive." Nathan lifted Lyra again, her weight a crushing burden. The siren grew louder. Death was closing in, and Trust had just stabbed him in the back. Nathan staggered out of the crater, Lyra's frail body pressed against his chest. His ribs ached from the drop, his leg bled where Kale's blade had cut, and his shoulder throbbed from the sniper's graze. But he didn't stop. The Sarin girl's breaths were barely there, short, ragged gasps that faded with every step. The Terran base was 2 miles off, a faint glow through the smoke, and Vaxar bombers screeched overhead, their payloads ready to turn the ground to ash. "Come on, kid," Nathan rasped, voice raw. "We're almost there." Footsteps crunched behind him. Private Jonas, the squad's rookie medic, jogging up with a medkit slung over his shoulder. "Sarge, you're a damn fool," he said, breathless but grinning. "Hale's pissed, but I couldn't let you die out here." Nathan grunted, relief flickering. "Good. She's crashing. Help me stabilize her." Jonas nodded, dropping to a knee beside them. He pulled out a fresh biofoam canister, but as Nathan set Lyra down, Jonas hesitated, his grin fading. "You're a hero, huh? Always gotta be the big shot." Nathan frowned. "What are you?" Before he could finish, Jonas smashed the canister against a rock, foam spraying uselessly into the dirt. "Sorry, Sarge," he sneered. "Can't let you hog the glory." He bolted, disappearing into the haze as Nathan lunged after him, too late. "You son of a bitch," he roared, fists clenched. Lyra whimpered, her pulse weakening. Nathan cursed, digging through his own kit, half empty now, the stim's gone. He tore a strip from his sleeve, wrapping it tight around her side, but it soaked through in seconds. A Vaxar squad burst from the shadows, 4 of them, scales glinting, rifles raised. "Human," one bellowed, firing. Nathan scooped Lyra up and dove behind a boulder as plasma scorched the ground. Shrapnel bit into his arm, fresh blood mixing with the old. He returned fire with his sidearm, dropping one Vaxar, but the others closed in, growling. Lyra's eyes fluttered shut, her chest still. No, 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 Nathan muttered, checking her pulse. Nothing. Panic hit him like a truck. He laid her flat, starting CPR, hands pumping her chest. Come on, kid, breathe. 1, 2, 3. Her ribs cracked under his hands, fragile as glass. A Vaxar loomed over the boulder, rifle aimed, but a scream cut through Lyra, charging from the crater, a jagged pipe in her hands. She slammed it into the Vaxar's skull, purple blood spraying as he dropped. The others turned on her, firing. Plasma tore through her chest, and she fell, gasping, "Protect her." Nathan kept pumping, tears stinging his eyes. "I will," he choked out. "I promise." Lyra's hand reached for Lyra, then went limp, her amber eyes glazing over. 10 seconds, 20. Lyra's lips turned blue. Nathan's arms shook, sweat dripping onto her face. "Don't you dare quit on me," he yelled, slamming his fist down one last time. A faint gasp, her chest jerked, eyes snapping open. She coughed, violet blood flecking her lips, and Nathan sagged, relief crashing through him. "That's it, kid," he whispered, scooping her back up. The Vaxar were distracted, dragging Lyra's body away, giving him a window. He ran, every muscle screaming, Lyra's weak cries spurring him on. Artillery whistled, Vaxar bombs raining down. Nathan sprinted for a ridge, the base's lights flickering ahead. A shell exploded behind him, the blast throwing him forward. He twisted mid-air, hitting the ground on his back to shield Lyra. Ears ringing, he checked her. She was breathing, barely. "Stay with me," he said, brushing her hair back. Her voice came, a whisper, "Hurts." Nathan's throat tightened. "I know, kid. Just a little longer." He hauled himself up, staggering toward the ridge. A stray Vaxar drone buzzed in, locking on. Nathan fired, clipping its wing, but it returned a shot, searing his thigh. He dropped to a knee, gritting his teeth, and dragged Lyra into a shallow ditch. The base was close half a mile, but the drone circled back, and artillery pounded closer. "We're not dying here," he growled, propping her against his chest. Her small hand gripped his sleeve, a spark of fight left in her. Nathan reloaded his sidearm, ready for the final push, Lyra's last words echoing in his head. Nathan stumbled over the ridge, Lyra's fragile weight pulling at his battered body. His thigh burned where the drone's plasma had hit, his ribs ached from the fall, and blood dripped from his arm, mixing with the dirt. The Terran base loomed ahead, its floodlights cutting through the smoke, gates cracked open. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the pain, Lyra's shallow breaths the only thing keeping him moving. "Almost there, kid," he rasped, voice hoarse. "You're gonna make it." Guards spotted him, rifles snapping up. "Sergeant Cole," one shouted, waving him in. Nathan staggered through the gates, collapsing to his knees as medics swarmed. Hands pried Lyra from his arms, her small form disappearing onto a hover gurney. "She's critical or now," a medic barked. Nathan tried to stand, but his legs buckled, exhaustion slamming him like a freight train. He'd done it, got her here. That had to count for something. Captain Marcus Hale stormed over, his broad frame casting a shadow. "Cole, you dumb bastard," he growled, blue eyes blazing. "You disobeyed a direct order for that." He jabbed a finger at the medical bay where Lyra had vanished. Nathan hauled himself up, meeting Hale's glare. She's a kid, sir. An innocent. I couldn't leave her. Hale's jaw tightened. She's Sarin. A potential spy. You've jeopardized this base, our mission, for some alien brat. Before Nathan could argue, a medic rushed out, face pale. Sir, the girl, she's stable, but there's something weird. Her blood's got Vaxar markers. Hale's head snapped around. What? The medic nodded. She's a hybrid. Sarin Vaxar mix. Could be a plant or a weapon. Hale's expression darkened, hand dropping to his sidearm. She's a threat. Cole, step aside. Nathan squared his shoulders, voice low. No, sir. She's a kid, not a damn bomb. Hale drew his pistol, aiming past Nathan at the medical bay. You're too soft, Sergeant. This war's bigger than your bleeding heart. Nathan lunged, grabbing Hale's wrist, twisting the gun away. You're not killing her, he snarled. Guards moved in, shouting, but Hale shoved Nathan back, fury boiling over. You're done, Cole. Lock him up. Two soldiers grabbed Nathan's arms, dragging him toward the brig. He fought, yelling, She trusts me, don't do this. Through the chaos, Nathan saw his chance, a supply shuttle idling near the hangar, its ramp down. He broke free, elbowing one guard in the jaw, and sprinted for the medical bay. Medics scattered as he burst in, yanking Lyra's gurney free. She stirred, eyes fluttering. Nathan, she mumbled. Hang on, he said, wheeling her toward the shuttle. Hale's voice roared behind him, stop him. Shots rang out, a bullet grazing Nathan's side, but he shoved Lyra aboard, slamming the hatch shut. He stumbled to the controls, hands shaking as he fired up the engines. The shuttle lurched skyward, alarms blaring across the base. Gotta get you out, he muttered, plotting a course off-world. A Vaxar fighter peeled after them, its cannons lighting up the dark. Nathan banked hard, dodging fire, but a hit clipped the wing, sending them spiraling. Hold tight, kid, he yelled, fighting the stick. The shuttle crashed hard on a barren moon, metal crumpling as they skidded across jagged rock. Nathan coughed, blood in his mouth, and crawled to Lyra. She lay in the wreckage, dazed but alive. He dragged her free, collapsing beside her, his legs shattered, chest heaving. You're safe, he said, voice fading. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, amber shifting to a strange violet. She pulled at her sleeve. Vaxar markings etched her skin, pulsing faintly. I'm both, she whispered. Sarin. Vaxar. Meant to stop this war. Nathan stared, stunned, then forced a weak smile. Then do it, kid. He pressed Tira's Sarin charm into her hand, the one she died giving him. For luck, he said, breath hitching. Lyra clutched it, tears falling. You saved me. Nathan's vision blurred, pain swallowing him. Had to, he murmured. You're worth it. His head slumped, eyes closing, life slipping away as the moon's cold wind howled. Lyra stood, small and alone, staring at his body. Her markings flared, a strength waking inside her. I'll finish it, she said, voice steady. For you. For Mom. She turned, facing the horizon, a hybrid caught between worlds, ready to forge a path Nathan couldn't. His death wasn't the end, it was her beginning. That's it, folks. Humanity's heart beats strong, even when the stars turn dark. What did you think of Nathan's sacrifice and Lyra's secret? Drop a comment below, type 88 if you want a heart from me. If you love this epic, smash that like, subscribe to Sci-Fi Space, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next galactic tale. Share it with your crew, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay awesome.